Oh, good, you're back at the eggs.
Oh, you said eggs.
Yeah.
I thought you said Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3.
I don't think that you could easily find a single person out there that doesn't at least know about Call of Duty. Pretty much everyone, and I do mean everyone, knows about it or has at least heard of it. Either the knowledge just being very vague or cursory things about the fact that it's a video game, or maybe you've picked it up here and there occasionally or know someone who has, or perhaps you got introduced in 2020 when the whole world was locked inside, and so you took up gaming as a little hobby and started playing Call of Duty Warzone with your buddies, and that was your diving point into the Call of Duty series. Or if you're anything like me, you've dedicated pretty much a majority of your childhood, teen years, and even adult life to this franchise. You know, it hit me the other day. We've made it to Black Ops 7. When the original Black Ops came out in 2010, I was 12 years old. I'm approaching my 30s now, and here I am, still invested in playing Call of Duty. But think about how crazy Black Ops 7 is for a moment. Black Ops 1 was the 7th entry in the Call of Duty series, full stop. We've gotten to the point where a sub-franchise now has 7 separate iterations. It's sometimes truly unbelievable to me how much Call of Duty has stood the test of time, and in particular, it's been the Black Ops series that has meant the most to me. The Black Ops games have changed my life in ways that I can't even fully begin to explain in this video. My entire life path, my career, the friends I've made, the places I've been and traveled, and everyone in my life is largely thanks to what the Black Ops series has done over its lifespan. But I'm sure this is also the case for many of you as well. In fact, I would wager that quite a lot of you listening probably met some of your best friends or even more on these very games. But because of how long Call of Duty has gone on, it's changed. I mean, we've all changed. I know I've changed quite a bit since the first Black Ops released. I was literally still a kid, and now I'm a fully grown man. You could say that a lot of the reverence for the older Black Ops games that we all feel is just mostly due to the relative simplicity of life or even nostalgia of being in your late childhood to early adolescence or critical teenage developmental years, which is why these games made such an impression on many of us. And to some extent, that is probably true. But I also think that Call of Duty itself has changed quite significantly. I mean, that statement really should come as a shock to no one. I mean, over the decades, Call of Duty has evolved, grown, and changed to go in so many different directions, sometimes being met with praise, other times met with disdain and a yearning for the past. But through it all, it has been the change that has also kept the game alive, as the community has never stopped talking about or discussing it. People like to say that other games are going to kill COD. You know, back in the day, for a while, it was Halo that was supposed to end Call of Duty, and then after a while, it was Battlefield that was the real COD killer, and then eventually even Fortnite threatened to do the same. And while Call of Duty itself has certainly fluctuated in popularity and culture several times spanning its life, coming and going every so often, but this has been the case for so long that in my opinion, the day Call of Duty truly dies is the day that we stop caring or talking about it with one another. Look, even if you hate Call of Duty now, that's at least a passion missing what once used to be, and that's still a hell of a lot better than not caring about it at all. Apathy is the ultimate sin, and for Call of Duty and all of their bad decisions, faults, and carelessness spanning across the series' entire history, I find myself fired up about a lot of these things because I truly, genuinely care about it. But it's Black Ops specifically that speaks to me and what I want to focus on in this video. Call of Duty has changed so much over the years, and being especially accelerated since 2020 and the start of the modern Call of Duty era. As I'm sure all of you well know, Call of Duty does weird stuff sometimes nowadays. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I honestly have to look at the game and wonder if I'm even really the target audience for this stuff anymore. Nevertheless, I can never truly find myself not caring about it, and this isn't at all to imply that everything that new COD does is outright bad. Hell, I like a lot of the newer Black Ops games for their own reasons, and particularly what they've done with a lot of the gameplay stuff, but a lot of the old games also did stuff that I didn't did not like either. But if I had to pick an era of games that means the most to me and I think is better, it's going to be the original Black Ops trilogy without question. Black Ops 1, 2, and 3 are all indispensable pieces of me. And as stated earlier, sure, you might be able to chalk a fair bit of that to how young I was at the time, but that's only part of the story. See, even as an adult, I think there's truly something genius and borderline magic at play with these original 3 games. In some real sense, the original Call of Duty Black Ops trilogy is a much different era than the Treyarch studios that makes COD today. In fact, there are very, very few devs still working on Black Ops 7 today that also helped to make Black Ops 1. Yes, there are a handful of them, and lots of people have switched roles and positions within the company or have moved up the corporate ladder, but I would say that largely the minds behind the creative direction and vision of what these games were going for are absolutely no longer there. Looking at the main 3 pillars of the Black Ops games, right? Campaign, multiplayer, and zombies, a lot of the campaign stuff was pioneered by Dave Anthony, who was very responsible for the direction of the original campaign. David Vonderhaar was the creative lead and role for the iconic multiplayer. Jimmy Zielinski was in charge for the creative vision of zombies. All of these people mentioned no longer work at Treyarch and honestly haven't for quite some time. This is the case for so many of the creatives that shaped out our favorite games into what they are. Now, to be clear, this is not to say that there still aren't extremely talented and passionate people at Treyarch today, because there certainly are, and I've met quite a few of them, and so I can vouch for that. But I would still say that it's just different now. Treyarch's different. You and I are different. And as much as I really like and appreciate the recent Black Ops games in so many ways, I'm going to make the argument that there's something more special hidden underneath the layers of the original 3, from the approach to storytelling, to its game design, to risk-taking, and much more. In fact, I think what makes the earlier Treyarch campaigns more impactful is actually down to 2 things, in my opinion. The first thing being is that Treyarch doesn't really make campaigns in-house anymore. If you haven't noticed, ever since Cold War, all of the Treyarch game campaigns have actually been made by Raven. Now, Raven Software has always assisted in Black Ops campaigns, but for the most part, it seems like they're actually taking over the lead creative role in the campaigns of Black Ops Cold War 6 and 7, whereas BO1, 2, and 3, these campaigns were made in-house. So that's a big one. I think Treyarch stories tend to be a lot more impactful when they're all made in-house rather than being outsourced. And the other part is, it feels like, they're making the fiction of the story, but it's also getting at bigger ideas just beyond itself. For example, Black Ops 1 is about man corrupting man. This was a major fear at the time and is very easily to look at human history, at that period to see why. Black Ops 2, Treyarch wanted to tell a story about man corrupting machine, us using our advancements in technology to bend the world to our wanting. And you can look at our current world today and see just how eerily accurate all that stuff in Black Ops 2 became to our real-life world. And Black Ops 3 is about machine corrupting man, an inversion on the prior concept with machines and AI changing the behavior of man itself. These are all super interesting ideas that have an uncomfortable degree of realness that recent Call of Duty games don't really approach as much anymore. But we're going to break all of these down, and I'm going to analyze the first 3 Black Ops games in a way that I never have before, because I want to know for myself, why are these games so special to me, and why can't anyone seem to let them go? To a point where it was supposed to be just this one-off idea, ended up being Treyarch's whole identity, even to this day.
And now wait a few moments, let him rest. This should help you remember everything. Giving you something extra to assist. Let's go through it again. The pain is difficult, isn't it? When he regains consciousness, double the voltage. We need to bring him back.
Before Black Ops existed, and really before Treyarch as we know it today existed, the company was founded in 1996 as Treyarch Invention LLC before being ultimately acquired by Activision shortly after. Treyarch had worked on a handful of projects and games in the industry at the time, including the classic Spider-Man game. Infinity Ward, however, was the true founder and mastermind behind the now quickly growing Call of Duty IP. It was easily the most traction an FPS game had gotten in quite a long time, and Call of Duty was taking the world by storm and filling a niche that hadn't been tapped into before like this, making Infinity Ward the pioneers and essentially the face of Call of Duty itself. Starting mainly as a World War II shooter, Call of Duty then enlisted the assistance of Treyarch to help on some other projects like Big Red 1 and a few others, but Treyarch would get their first big break and lead development role on Call of Duty 3. This was Treyarch's first real take on what Call of Duty can look like when it's not made by Infinity Ward. And in my opinion, Call of Duty 3 is not nearly as strong as COD 1 and 2 or even COD 4. As being their first crack at making something to this scale and following in the shadow of Infinity Ward, Treyarch still had a lot to learn and hadn't quite found what made them truly stand out or unique from IW. COD 3, for all of its good things that it did, it was ultimately not quite as well received as the previous Call of Duty 1 and 2. And not to mention, it was still a World War II shooter, which was by no means breaking the mold by any means, but that would all change on November 5th, 2007.
Ready up.
The release of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and in my opinion, the genesis of the modern Call of Duty formula. The first 3 COD games exist, yes, and they are important in their own ways, but I feel like most of us can agree that COD 4 was the most pivotal and influential game by a massive margin. COD 4 was the seed that basically every Call of Duty game sprouted from. This moves Infinity Ward to an even higher position of power, and we're still predominantly seen as the leaders of the Call of Duty brand. But Treyarch wasn't done yet. They still had yet to break out of the shadow under the eclipse of Infinity Ward's brilliance, and the very next year, Call of Duty 5, also known as World at War, would release. Now, despite Infinity Ward taking a leap away from the World War II genre where they started and making several changes to itself to be more appropriate for modern warfare, Treyarch continued on in the World War II genre. However, World at War is a quite different game to both COD 3 and their prior mainline titles, and even COD 4. World at War is a much more realistic, gritty, brutal depiction of some of the lesser-known conflicts of World War II. This opened up the door for them to do something a little bit different tonally to Infinity Ward itself as a studio and Treyarch's prior projects, not to mention the inclusion of the Zombies mode, which was basically an accident but secretly thrown in at the end of the campaign, not advertised by Activision, and this set Treyarch up to be a very different flavor to Infinity Ward. The studios at this moment in time were very competitive, Treyarch feeling like they were constantly the little brother to Infinity Ward, the lesser of the two, and always trailing behind all of the cool and interesting ideas and risks that they would take. But World at War would signal an extremely different vibe and tone that Treyarch could lean on. The unexpected, overwhelming success of World at War led them to figure out how to carry this on. Seeing that Infinity Ward felt comfortable enough to leave the World War II genre behind, Treyarch was probably looking at that and saying to themselves that they could probably do the same. Behind the scenes of development, Treyarch was hard at work on their next title. The insane, monumentous success of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was Infinity Ward clearly finding themselves as a studio and making something truly great. The peak of their identity and vision was now on full display. Treyarch was likely feeling this immense pressure to either match or surpass that, but it wasn't going to be easy. Internally, morale at the studio was quite low for a while, during which they tried to find exactly what it was that they can do differently to make a stance against Infinity Ward. This rivalry was in part a major reason why each studio tried their hardest to push boundaries of what was possible in their games. This would ultimately lead to each studio firing on all cylinders and doing their best and most creative work Treyarch, if you ask me, as the time that was allotted to them by Activision to develop the next game was starting to come to a close. Treyarch had a bit of a crisis moment. Nothing was really working until they decided to pivot somewhat last minute to a direction COD had never gone before, a direction that was much more psychological, more serious, and more cryptic than it had ever been attempted before. Treyarch set out to make a game in the Cold War era, but it wasn't about the literal Cold War, which they could have done and actually would do many years later, but Black Ops was already a subversion because this game uses the Cold War circumstances as a backdrop to tell a new and interesting story in a way that had never been attempted. This would all culminate into the first game of Call of Duty Black Ops. Real quick, I just want to mention that I don't use AI to help me make any of these videos. I hate that I have to mention that, but, I feel like it has to be said now. These are passion projects for me, and I feel like it'd be disingenuous to use AI when it's really undercutting the message that this is a love letter to this series of games for me. And so, in fact, my promise to you with this channel is that I will never use AI in the production of my videos. This channel will, as long as it operates, is by a human, and it's for you humans. So if you want to help out, just consider subscribing. I would appreciate it a lot. I would love to hit 1 million subs one day, but we'll see. Anyways, back to what I was saying. I cannot stress at this point enough that Call of Duty Black Ops was never meant to become the indispensable piece of Call of Duty's brand for over a decade to come. This was merely a really creative and novel project idea that was Treyarch's attempt at crystallizing their now more unique identity as a studio and providing a vastly different yet still intriguing experience to players and fans. It's kind of insane to see how far the Black Ops brand has been taken, and Infinity Ward throughout its years have tried some other projects that deviate quite a bit from the Modern Warfare formula. Ghosts and Infinite Warfare were departures from that, and pretty massive ones, but that allowed them to experiment. Even if these games weren't necessarily met with the best reception, Treyarch, however, since 2010 has never deviated from the Black Ops branding and theming even once. Now, at this point in time, I would make the argument that since Treyarch has changed and evolved so much since 2010, as has Call of Duty and the world and you and I think it's about time for Treyarch to hang up the Black Ops hat. This new Treyarch needs to find its own thing, as the IP of Black Ops is now largely being ran by people who didn't create it from the start. But anyways, that's a totally different discussion for another day. The point is that Treyarch has finally found its identity and what made them stand out with Black Ops 1. I have to ask the question, what exactly is Black Ops, in the context of Call of Duty at least? Is Black Ops the literal characters, right, Woods, Mason, Hudson, and so on, or is Black Ops more about the spirit of it, the spirit that takes risks and pushes the line of what is acceptable or possible when it comes to storytelling in video games and making an experience? Treyarch of the times, I think, could make a Black Ops game with any cast of characters or any time period more or less, but if the way that the story's being delivered is unique and different, it would still feel the same. I would argue that Black Ops is about pushing boundaries. The more recent Black Ops games, I feel like, don't really get that. They understand the timeline, the literal events of these games, plus their characters, but I don't think they get it in the sense that Black Ops was about pushing that line and taking risks. Black Ops Cold War and Black Ops 6 feel relatively safe in that regard and more like they're skinwalking the IP of Black Ops without fully understanding what made those original games work so well. In fact, before Black Ops 1 even released, the initial teasers for the game came with the GK Nova 6 website. This was an ARG that at the time seemed completely unrelated to Call of Duty. If you had just stumbled across this website with no context, it was unsettling, mysterious, and just weird. And without any Activision branding slapped all over it, it was truly an amazing way to set the tone for the game that once people finally put the pieces together that it was COD, it was worth noting that the internet was way different back in 2010. So GK Nova 6 was likely the right thing at the right time. It just made sense for that era. And I've always felt that the new studios don't quite get Black Ops from the perspective that it was all about not knowing what was truly real or not. That extended to the game, but even outside the game, and not knowing if you actually have the truth of it all. So, how does Black Ops push these boundaries? I would argue that everything from its main menu to its campaign and immediately after the campaign are all a part of this. But to fully grasp the weight of all of that, we need to discuss the campaign and the story of Black Ops. Black Ops starts right away with a clean and seamless transition from the main menu right into the very start of the game, something that is highly underrated for immersion in my opinion. You're in the interrogation chair, right, being questioned by a mysterious voice and seeing numbers both in your vision and on the screen. The narrative is a recounting of Alex Mason's memories as he walks through the events to try to get what the interrogator wants. Right away, the game gives us some subversion as we go to Castro's compound to eliminate him, only for the escape plan to be foiled and Alex Mason getting captured by the Russians, also who revealed to him that the Castro they just killed was a fake. Also, side note, who would agree to be the stand-in for Castro who likely knows they're going to get assassinated? I don't know who would agree to that. Anyways, immediately, we see that not everything that we witness is the truth. That on top of the fact that Alex Mason proves to be an unreliable narrator. The story is mostly told in chronological order with a few exceptions. We also learned that Alex Mason was sent off to Vorkuta after being captured by the Soviets, a Russian prison camp where he meets Viktor Reznov. Yes, the same Reznov who appears at the end of the World at War campaign.
Reznov. Mason. Every journey begins with a single step. This is step one!
Through their escape attempt from the prison, Reznov sets it up so that Mason can escape, but Reznov wasn't so lucky.
Go, Mason, go! Your turn! Come on! Step 8, Reznov! Freedom! For you, Mason! Not for me! Reznov!
Afterwards, from this point, Mason is tasked by the US President John F. Kennedy to take out an operation of the Soviets called the Ascension Group. And I've pointed out this detail before, but it's so unique that I have to include it. In this mission where you go to the Pentagon to meet JFK, and in the moment specifically where Mason comes face to face with him and is breaking apart mentally trying to hold it together, in this very moment when the lens shifts, in the background, you might notice that the TVs cut to real authentic footage of JFK's assassination day, but it only lingers for a brief moment and doesn't draw attention to it before cutting back to reality. This is such a great detail that really tells the story in a very non-verbal way. This campaign does an amazing job at that, but Mason afterwards is bent on taking out Kravchenko, Steiner, and Dragovich. And then we also learn a little bit more about Reznov's history and from his perspective how Steiner and the Soviets made an unexpected pack using the new chemical agent developed called Nova 6, and to test it, Steiner uses Reznov's best friend Dmitri as a subject and traps him in a chamber and murders him in cold blood. From this point, we continue to walk through Mason's recounting of events, including an insurgency where Viktor Reznov appears once again to save Alex Mason. Reznov rescues you in a handful of moments when you are in need, and the goal is the same, to kill Dragovich, the person weaponizing Nova 6, Steiner, and Kravchenko. Eventually, we learn that after Reznov hunts down Steiner on Rebirth Island, we cut over to Hudson's POV from the exact same sequence of events, and now, instead of Viktor Reznov killing Steiner, we realize that it was actually Mason himself.
I'm fine. Check Steiner.
He's dead.
What about Reznov, the defector? We need to find him.
We won't. He was never here. I didn't believe it till I saw it with my own eyes. What did they do to you in Vorkuta, Mason?
Bowman is eventually killed after being captured, and Frank Woods gets into a scuffle with Kravchenko, only for him to pull a grenade and they both jump out the window. As things start to get more dire, then Hudson reveals himself as being the interrogator and tries to get Mason to tell him where the numbers are being broadcasted from. This is where the truth is revealed, and we see that not only are the numbers being broadcast from the Rusalka, the ship that they were at when Mason was taken by the Soviets, but that also appeared at the beginning of the game game, all of the answers were actually shown to you in the very first cutscene, but of course you didn't have the context to understand them. They had all been brainwashed to follow the number sequences, but in Vorkuta, when Mason was being programmed by Steiner and Reznov and Dragovich and Kravchenko, Reznov actually planted his own commands onto Mason to get revenge and to kill them all. Reznov, the whole time after Vorkuta, was all in Mason's head, which is why no one else in the game during missions ever acknowledges his existence.
Never in Vietnam. The real defector with the Nova 6 dossier died during the attack on the MAC-V. He was never in the rat tunnels.
What the fuck's wrong with you? Jacob is here. This way. We cannot let him slip through our grasp.
He was never at Rebirth Island.
My name is Victor.
Mason!
My name is Victor Reznov, and I will have my revenge!
Mason, no!
Step 8, Reznov!
Victor Reznov's been dead for 5 years. He died at Vorkuta during the escape. All the years you thought he was with you, that was just in your mind.
The final thing from this point is to destroy the Rusalka and kill Dragovich. When you encounter him, something very important happens.
Yes! I'm gonna kill you! Trying to fuck with my mind! Fire! You don't know anything! Try to turn me against my own! Try to make me kill my own president! Right?
The last thing you do is blow up the Rusalka and head back to the surface for the finale of the game. Something you probably don't know is that the original ending of this game for a while was going to be that this moment when you come out of the water and the sky opens up and these planes fly by and it's really dramatic, is that you're actually dead this whole time and you went down with the Rusalka and never quite made it back to the surface. That makes sense considering how weird this very last part feels, but considering they made Black Ops 2 and other sequels, obviously, like, you were still alive. But afterwards, the final cutscene plays, raising even more questions.
0, 11, 24, 11, 1, 7, 19, 20, 10, 14, 2, 3, 19, 0, 8, 11, 22, 21, 5, 17, 17, 0, 10, 2, 23, 1, 8, 11, 25, 22,
22.
9, 4,
6.5
12,
millimeter.
9, 23, 1, 12, 0, 12, 16,
11, 22.
6, 12, 8, 4, 1, 6, 2, 10, 2, 1.
Texas. Ascension.
The very last shot of the game, it's implied here that Mason is the one who killed JFK alongside the statement from Dragovich, who said that they tried to make him kill his own president. It's a campaign that honestly leaves you at the end with more questions than answers, but at the same time, it's a really well done self-contained story that's told in a non-linear way, and it seems kind of disconnected at first, but it all snaps into place perfectly by the end. The moment when it all clicks for the first time is so satisfying, and it's a real way to establish that Treyarch was going to mess with your head a little bit and make you work for the story. But you'd be wrong if you think that the story completely ends there. See, you may have noticed that in the levels you can collect intel, which are collectibles hidden throughout the level that give you additional info on characters and what's going on in the story. But it goes even deeper, as hidden messages can be found in the intel that just might help you somewhere else. What do you remember most about Black Ops 1? Is it the style? Is it the campaign? Is it the multiplayer? Is it the main menu? One of the most iconic things about Black Ops 1, I think, is the main menu. Not only was it unsettling, stylish, creepy, and very unnerving, but it also allowed you to mash your triggers to break free from the arm restraints, allowing you to get up and out of the chair, creating a really seamless experience from gameplay to menu, but also allowing you to feel like you're breaking the rules, which was Treyarch's whole MO with this game. There isn't much you can do in this room, but in the back sits a computer terminal, and this thing literally works like a computer codex. It has a massive number of different functions, ranging all the way from cheat codes that unlock all of the missions or the hidden zombies map. There's an AI therapist named Alicia you can talk to, and there's even a text-based adventure game you can play called Zork. But by far, the most curious stuff you can find are the files within different servers. There's a Dreamland server, a Majestic 12 server, and even a very strange and quite mysterious Derice server. On these various ones, you can find and access certain files, and you can get into hidden concept art or sound bites and even additional information about some of the characters. Keep in mind, this terminal does not really help you in any way on how to navigate or access its contents outside of the actual physical functions. To enter someone's file, it usually requires a password that can sometimes be found either in another file or in the intel drops that you gather while playing the levels. This terminal is just fascinating because it truly feels like you're not supposed to be seeing this stuff. Matter of fact, there's even a warning that it is federally illegal to access this content when you're getting into the codex. Yet by far, the most captivating stuff in the whole terminal, in my opinion, is the Derice server and a certain email. You see, all the servers, Dreamland and Majestic 12, have a handful of folders that you can open with their respective passwords, and there's even a whole Derice server that is based on and provides additional lore of the Derice zombies map. Yet despite many logs existing in this server, no passwords have ever been found to access these. Treyarch have even danced around answering the question as to whether the Derice passwords even exist, leading many to speculate that either these passwords aren't even real or they just haven't been found yet. However, if somehow they do exist and are out there, nobody has found them 15 years later. Now, the other very interesting thing in here is an email, specifically a letter to Jason Hudson. As we've established already, it's pretty clear that Reznov was never really there with Mason past Vorkuta. That's the twist, and all of Mason seeing Reznov was his programming to get revenge and kill the others. However, what if I told you that Reznov may actually still be alive? Don't believe me? Jason Hudson has a letter from a man named John Trent, who is inquiring about the nature and whereabouts of Alex Mason. But right near the end of this letter, he says, "Victory cannot be achieved without sacrifice," which is the very same line spoken by Viktor Reznov, and this email was after Vorkuta. So the question still remains open whether or not Reznov was actually alive this whole time, still working through Mason, but also not truly dead either. This is just a theory, but ultimately what you choose to believe with this information is totally up to you. It's pretty clear by this point how Black Ops was a story about man corrupting man, done using the backdrop of a very real fear at the time, the looming threat of the Soviet influence and the paranoia and strange tactics of sleeper agents. The thing is, the number stations depicted in Black Ops are real. A number station is a shortwave radio station characterized by broadcasts of formatted numbers which are believed to be addressed to intelligence officers operating in foreign countries. These can come in the form of Morse code or really any other translatable code frequency. These were meant to be able to transmit messages and information undetected and were used during the Cold War. But interestingly, number stations has been used as recently as 2016. North Korea revived number broadcast stations in July after a hiatus of 16 years, which some believe to be the start of a psychological war. 16 such broadcasts occurred in 2017, including unusually timed transmissions in April of that year. This was a real threat to humanity back then, and it was a main fear of so many people in that era. Treyarch touching on these real-life events, but more so the underground, conspiratorial, and hidden aspects of the war was what ultimately made this stand out and be impactful to so many people. Another aspect that helped make up Black Ops into the experience that it was of course its multiplayer, which had learned quite a lot from World at War at this point, and because of the relative lack of resources they had at the time comparatively to Call of Duty now, they really used the gameplay to tell a story, and they also made a lot of gameplay innovations that were just objective improvements from their prior title, and they tried some interesting ideas as well, including COD points. Now, COD points exist in, current day games, but they're very different as they're a literal microtransaction. But COD points in Black Ops 1 were an in-game acquirable currency that you could use to bet on like wager matches and then buy your way through the progression system and unlock different perks, pieces of equipment, and so on. Black Ops 1 was also big on adding new community features such as theater mode, which allowed you to go into your match and look at things from a different angle and perspective, get cinematic clips, and really just look at it from a different viewpoint than you typically get in-game. We also had the first ever edition of the custom emblem editor, which is something that I still gravely miss in the year 2025. So many iconic multiplayer maps that still appear in COD to this day, remastered of course, but still appear nonetheless, started in Black Ops 1. But what I think is really interesting is that all of the maps, for the most part, had some kind of story around it. Some of them were small stories, and some of them were actually very interesting. For example, do you remember this map in Black Ops 1 multiplayer? It was a DLC map called Hangar 18. This is a multiplayer map that is based off the real-life conspiracy of Hangar 18 at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which is purported to contain UFO technology. Apparently, on October 11th, 1974, Robert Spencer Carr, who was a science fiction author and a UFO conspiracy theorist, conducted a live radio interview where he publicly claimed that alien bodies were recovered from a 1948 flying saucer crash in Aztec, New Mexico, and were being kept at this Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And this was corroborated by the fact that a surgical nurse claimed to have witnessed an alien autopsy in the facility. However, Robert Carr's father claimed that his son was really a compulsive habitual liar, so reports about this certainly vary, to say the least. Whether it's true or not, though, obviously doesn't really matter in this context. It's just this is what Black Ops would do to try to tell the story even further, and they were playing off this real-life conspiratorial lore that was just very Black Ops. Like, that's what the spirit of it was that newer Call of Duty just doesn't seem to get. The multiplayer was a fantastic step in the right direction for Treyarch and started to become their defining feature in a way, where two sects of the Call of Duty community were beginning to form. You were either a Modern Warfare guy or you were a Black Ops guy, and largely that was due to Treyarch's slightly different approach to MP as a game mode, and some people just preferred this flavor than the others. After you beat the campaign, instead of being immediately thrown into multiplayer, similar to World at War, what would happen is you would actually load into a zombies map, and Black Ops 1 Zombies was really interesting because in some ways it was a direct advancement of what they had made in World at War, which again was pretty much an accident game mode, but this time they came in with a bit more intentionality, a little more budget, and with some more creative ideas. BO1 Zombies had a variety of maps as well. You had Keynoter Toten and 5 on disc, which ended up being very different maps in their own right, and throughout the DLC, you actually had the introduction of the first real main Easter egg. See, Ascension was still a survival map. You were just supposed to go on and shoot zombies and live as long as you can, but it also had a little quest underneath the surface that if you were digging hard enough, you might just find something special in there. From this point, the zombies community began to form because this mode that you thought it was something, it was actually something else. All of the maps in Black Ops 1 were really built around hazards, right? You had the Pentagon Thief in 5, you had George Romero in Call of the Dead, you had these monkeys and all of these traps in Shangri-La, you had, the astronaut guy on Moon. All of these maps are built around hazards and avoiding them and dealing with the map being very oppressive to you and figuring out unique solutions to still survive in spite of that. Jimmy Zielinski was going for very wild and creative ideas, and it ultimately culminated into Black Ops 1's finale, which was Moon. In this ending, once you beat the Easter egg, you literally blow up the Earth. An absolutely insane finale to a mode that really shouldn't have existed in the first place, but was starting to find its own. I think Black Ops 1, from the perspective of the campaign, the multiplayer, and even zombies, you could say that these are just well enough to be self-contained and didn't necessarily need sequels, right? Like, you could have the Moon ending, or you could even have the campaign ending and just leave it as that, but it also still left enough room for them to make compelling stories off of what they had laid out, and that's exactly what they would do with Black Ops 2. And also, I should mention that Black Ops 1 had another little secret mode called Dead Ops Arcade. Again, this was just like a fun little secret mode that wasn't really advertised, but was in there because you felt like there was always something more to your game that you would find that was unexpected, and Dead Ops became a staple of the Black Ops franchise that would appear in every other game from this point forward. But with the original Black Ops game being so self-contained yet simultaneously open-ended, this of course left room on the table for them to make a sequel, and they sure enough would with Call of Duty Black Ops 2.
This product not yet rated.
On November 13th, 2012, Treyarch released Black Ops 2 to the world, and BO2 is an interesting game, as it is the Treyarch title that, out of the original 3, came together the easiest and with the least trouble. Likely riding high off the success from the original Black Ops, it felt like the next logical step to go ahead and make Call of Duty Black Ops 2, as IW had found their thing clearly with Modern Warfare. Black Ops 2 was actually the first Call of Duty game ever to take place in the future. I mean, like really in the future, which is insane to think about now, as the tagline for the game is "The future is black," when at this moment of me writing this video, Black Ops 2 is literally set in the past now. Either way, this was the first time that Call of Duty jumped forward to the distant future, a little over 10 years out from when it was made in 2012. For its production, Treyarch and Dave Anthony specifically got really into taking military advisors and talking to them about where warfare was heading in the next decade. This is where the things like autonomous combatants and robots and drones had come in. And as far as their predictions go for where 2025 would take us, honestly, it's not too far different from our real-life, everyday reality, which is brilliant from a game design perspective and equally as terrifying for obvious reasons, I would think. The shift to cyber warfare and its consequences are the main stage for this experience. This is where the second big idea comes into play, that being man corrupts machine. This whole campaign's narrative is a story about what happens when we misuse the technology we're given, and tells a totally novel and fictional story with the backdrop of man corrupts machine. Black Ops 2 aimed to focus its identity on what the world would look like in about a decade or so, and the multiplayer would follow suit. Zombies would be kind of doing its own thing, which we'll discuss a bit more of later, but I think Treyarch, when they were making BO2, could have very easily just done what they did in Black Ops 1, right, and not really do too much different. But as Treyarch of that era would always do, they continued to push the line and the boundaries of Call of Duty storytelling. You see, in BO2, there isn't exactly one set narrative. There are some major pieces that are intact and always present, but Black Ops 2 has a branching storyline structure and multiple endings. This was done to give the player not only a different experience and a good reason to play it more than once, but also for the first time to be a real participant in the game's unfolding story. No longer are you just kind of going through the motions and watching things happen as they play out, but now you have an active hand in shaping the very fate of these characters and this world. It's such a shame because it's so good here, and Call of Duty has never really tried this idea to the same scale. Black Ops Cold War technically has multiple endings, but that's only determined by the very final choice you make, and is not determined by this long list of micro decisions throughout the game. In any case, Black Ops 2 was already shaping up to be a very engaging experience, because instead of just being told from the perspective of Mason's son in the future, we see it from two unique timelines, from right after the events of Black Ops 1 in the 1980s, and the 2025 stuff with David Mason. This game keeps very fresh and interesting always, because one time period or setting never really gets played out for too long or gets overdone. And not only that, but I have to say just the lengths that Treyarch went to create unique assets and art for two unique time settings for one game is always very commendable. It's a bit more difficult to talk about the story of Black Ops 2 now, as due to its nature, it doesn't really have one set narrative, as we've said, and Treyarch have given it a canon ending, and the one that they've now decided is the correct one for the Black Ops universe in BO7. But part of the magic of BO2 at the time was that deciding for yourself and using your imagination about which ending is canon and which one really happened. I don't think they made this campaign with a canon ending in mind exactly. They just wanted this to be the experience, and you to decide for yourself. The main story of Black Ops 2 revolves around David Mason, Alex's grown son, now in JSOC, speaking with an older Frank Woods. David Mason is trying to inquire and get more info on Raul Menendez, a drug lord turned power-hungry maniac trying to incite violence under the guise of Cordis Dia. Raul Menendez, in his childhood, lost everything in a CIA operation that killed his family, fueling his hatred for America and specifically for Frank Woods. Black Ops 2 has a visceral and unapologetic way of telling the story of their villain. There's a reason that Raul Menendez is still powerful as a character and why he's largely regarded as the best COD villain. That's also due to his immaculate performance, which unfortunately his voice actor passed away not too many years ago. There are missions where you are forced to step into the perspective of Menendez, which forces you to understand his viewpoint and his pain, even if you don't agree with his actions. It's very clever, I think, to allow the player to play the villain in controlled moments like these, because now you have to see the conflict from every angle, and that makes you all the more personally engaged in the story and have to think about how you feel about everything more. On top of the fact that now you know your actions have consequences, so everything you do, even when you're playing as the villain, matters. I would say that Black Ops 2 has my favorite campaign, even though Black Ops 1 is probably still more iconic, and Black Ops 3's campaign is, I would say, more interesting, but Black Ops 2, I do believe, is overall the most well-done and well-aged experience, not just due to the fact of the multiple endings, but it's more about how all of the pieces work in tandem to immerse you. Something that I feel very strongly about that I've mentioned before is that COD campaigns post Modern Warfare 2019, they're all done in the same style. It's mission, cinematic, and so on. It's a formula that I think works better for Modern Warfare titles personally, but Black Ops 2 did a great job at keeping you a part of the game. I love all of the little moments, like when you pull up to McKnight's house and you're kind of just sitting in his backyard and having a beer, you're still playing this, or when you're walking through the resort and going to the nightclub. It's all of the little moments that were probably deemed too boring to include in a level now. So all of those little moments are now just being baked into these cutscenes, and it's just something I really dislike because I feel like it's predictable, but also it takes you out of the game. When the point of a video game is, honestly, I like when it has more game. I know, crazy, right? This is why Black Ops 2's campaign is so gripping regardless of the choices you make. Now, those choices range from either choosing to take someone out or not. It can be finding a hidden dossier in the back of a level that you can very easily miss. It can be shooting the target in the leg instead of the head, and so much more. These little moments all calculate sort of into what ending you can get, as well as the Strike Force missions, which I really don't care for even to this day from a gameplay perspective. I just don't find them very fun, but I'll play them to get the best ending, or at least what Treyarch now considers to be the canon ending. The real twist in this story comes when Woods tells Mason about his op with Objective False Prophet. They're supposed to trade Manuel Noriega for another POW. This person, Hudson tells you, is Raul Menendez, literally the only person that you want to kill more than Noriega in the game at this point. But something was off the entire time, and it's only revealed later, after the fact, that Woods shoots the target of who it really was.
What are you looking so smug about? The fuck is going on? What's going on here? No. Mason! Fool.
This might be the best mission in any COD game, period. Like, it's so pivotal to the story, and the way that it locks you down in the perspective of Woods the entire time without cutting away, which feels really vulnerable and frustrating, and it forces you to sit with it. It's uncomfortable to watch, and it should be, and that's why it's so powerful. We see that Menendez kills Hudson, but spares Woods, and then talks to young David Mason instead. This is where much of their dynamic is set up, and the relationship between David Mason and Frank Woods was always something really special in this game, and honestly carries it from the perspective of the characters. In the final acts of the game, you can decide how you want things to play out. There are so many different variants of how this scene can play out on the USS Obama. All of the choices you've made throughout the campaign sort of intertwine, leading to a massive amount of different outcomes, but largely the game hinges on what you decide to do at the very end. When you capture him, do you kill Raul Menendez, or do you let him live and then capture him instead? This is a big choice to make, but according to Black Ops 3, the canon ending was that Mason actually killed Menendez here, but you can choose to capture him, and if you shot the prisoner in the leg instead, even Alex Mason can be alive and reunite at the end with Woods at the end of the game. This is largely considered the best ending, but there are some very dark endings too. If you make all really poor choices, kill lots of people when the time comes, Menendez can walk free. He can break out of prison, he can go to the home and kill Woods and then go and burn himself in a grave. Every single ending is striking one way or another. You have a villain that you can truly empathize with and understand, you have a sometimes very heartbreaking and tough choices you have to make, and you have a story that uses the future of 2025 as a backdrop for all of it. The way that Black Ops 2 accurately predicted the direction of the world and the evolution of warfare is almost miraculous if it weren't so scary. This was certainly an extremely risky way to tell a campaign story, as it had never been attempted before, not even by Infinity Ward, and honestly, Treyarch hasn't even really attempted this since. This is absolutely lightning in a bottle, and of the original three, I would still say that Black Ops 2 is my favorite campaign. If I characterized Black Ops 1's campaign as being the most iconic of the three, I feel like I would characterize Black Ops 2's multiplayer as being the most iconic experience from this trilogy. There's something about Black Ops 2 that I guess I have only appreciated more as time has gone on, and I've known that there's something special to this one for a very long time, but all the way in 2025, this multiplayer is still completely palatable, it's a ton of fun, and can still be played with a, albeit very small but dedicated community to this day. BO2 had introduced so many new innovations from gameplay systems in Black Ops 1, with the modification of quite a few of them as well. They would make a massive change to the iconic killstreak system that Call of Duty had been using since COD 4, and they decided to go with a system for score streaks, which, still appear today in our modern Call of Duty games. This is a slightly different take on kill streaks, which, was literally the only way to acquire these was getting kills on the enemy, but score streaks changed this a little bit and now started to reward objective players. It even rewarded you for getting assists, just other ways to play and interact with the game. Even if you're not just the top fragger on your team, you can still get streaks and you can still make things happen. Score streaks, I just believe, are objectively the better system than kill streaks, especially as it relates to modern Call of Duty's gameplay systems, and it's something that I don't see them ever getting rid of, honestly. And when you talk about community features, Treyarch went out of their way to make literally everything bigger bigger and better. They had expanded the functions of theater modes that it was more smooth, you could do more with it, you could even upload directly to YouTube, which is how I uploaded my first ever YouTube videos on this channel. You also had the emblem editor, which again, I really miss, but more importantly, they gave you even more layers and more customization options to take it further and expand your art direction. This generated this whole sub-community that, because Treyarch would add these things and then just let the community play with them, that's why Call of Duty had such a diverse community that supported it underneath. And I had a realization not too long ago, actually when I was making my Black Ops 6 review, I had realized that this whole entire time, right, now that we get free DLC in the era of live service games, we have a lot more optional microtransactions. But I had a moment where I realized that, yeah, I'm not even really sure if we can classify many of these as micro anymore. I mean, some of these prices are outrageous. When in Black Ops 2, you remember that the camos they added later on could be bought and purchased and used on any weapon in the game, including melees, without fail for $2. That's just not something we will ever see again in our lifetime. Granted, this was still in the era of paid DLC, so there was a little bit of trade-off to be had, but still, microtransactions, at least in new Call of Duty, I don't think can be considered micro anymore. They may have been appropriate to be called that in Black Ops 2, but certainly not in Black Ops 6. Not only is Black Ops 2's multiplayer extremely fun and crafted and iconic, but many of the maps that they originally developed for this game, Call of Duty still can't let go of. I mean, practically a ton of Black Ops 7's MP marketing was, remember this from BO2 coming back? I think it just goes to show exactly how well done these were and how much care and attention to detail was put into these maps. Not that there aren't from modern Call of Duty, and to some degree, yeah, it is just pulling on the nostalgia strings, but still, I think that Black Ops 2's multiplayer still holds up even now. I've been playing it the last couple of months on, Plutonium, which is pretty much the only real way to get the vanilla experience again to some degree, and it's still a ton of fun. I have probably more fun playing this than I do like modern MP. Now, it wasn't perfect, right? I'm guilty of having some rose-tinted glasses when it comes to this multiplayer. There was still stuff like lag compensation and and the DSR right before it got nerfed, but there was all kinds of just jank in this multiplayer. But the point is, it was incredibly fun, even if it wasn't always impeccably balanced. I mean, I think this is the case for many people, but myself included, that my friends and I, even after Black Ops 2 was not in its yearly life cycle, when Ghosts had come out, or even Advanced Warfare, for the most part, when I wanted to play multiplayer, I was still jumping on Black Ops 2. It wasn't until Black Ops 3 that I really, migrated to a new multiplayer full time. And it's clearly not just me who feels this way about Black Ops 2's MP, because Black Ops 7 has pretty much done everything it could to emulate the good aspects of this multiplayer. I mean, they pretty much made the main menu music the one straight from this game, which is still a banger even now. And people go all the time, oh, if you just love Black Ops 2 so much, why don't you just go back and play it? And, you can go and play Plutonium and pretty much have the vanilla, day one experience in some sense. But in some ways, it's also just, yeah, this game is built to last and the multiplayer is impeccable, but it's also over 10 years old at this point. And we are still looking for a multiplayer that can top the joy that we felt on this one. I think a lot of that, though, is just the community at the time, and the gameplay, complemented that, but it was all of us playing this at the same time was what really brought us together and made this feel special.
Welcome aboard!
The story of the zombies mode on Black Ops 2 is one of the most dramatic, and it's also one of the most interesting because it's a game that really wasn't working in the beginning. Even though Jimmy Zielinski found a fair amount of moderate success with Black Ops 1 zombies, and then the finale of the moon exploding the Earth leading directly into Black Ops 2, Transit, the map on disk that BO2 launched with, was not well received by the zombies community at all. Now Transit is looked back on with a little bit more fondness fondness, but a lot of complicated feelings. But overall, I would still say that Transit is not a good map objectively. There are so many things and problems with it. It was held back tremendously by the hardware at the time, but it's undeniable that this map was a blast to play with friends. And this is also when Zombies public matches were a lot more active and alive. I mean, people do kind of play public matches, I think, in modern Zombies, but that whole idea has really died down. You're either playing with friends that you know specifically, or you're playing by yourself, which in the day, you know, BO1 and 2, your public matches were just a lot more common. That's actually where I met some of my best gaming friends ever, was in BO2 public lobbies on Zombies. But the point is, Zombies was off to a really rough start with Transit, and it only got worse in DLC 1. Die Rise was the exact same situation, where it was kind of a strangely designed map that really wasn't gelling well with the Zombies community at the time, and Treyarch also knew this. After this point, Jimmy Zielinski was let go from his position, and this is where we saw the beginning of the Blundell era, and really what saved Black Ops 2 Zombies and led into what would arguably be the peak of Zombies in Black Ops 3. Now you might say, well, hang on a second, Chopper, Buried is a Jimmy Zielinski map, like clearly he still wasn't done, and that's kind of true, at least, you know, according to these leaked design documents we have. Buried was a lot of Jimmy Zielinski's conception, but he had a very different idea for what it would look like. Black Ops 2's Mob of the Dead was Jason Blundell's first real map that he spearheaded, and then that would be followed up by Buried, but Buried's design was actually largely a David Vonderhaar map, so they it was a bit of a hybrid between him and Jimmy, but clearly Jason and Jimmy maps / David Vonderhaar maps have a very different style and gameplay approach than each other. They're practically exact opposites. These Jason maps are a lot more structured in a way where it's more quest oriented and story and narrative heavy, as opposed to Jimmy Zielinski's more chaotic and just sort of random feeling maps, which makes sense because Jason Blundell was on the narrative team prior to spearheading Zombies, and his, you know, tenure would end in Black Ops 2 with the release of Origins, which is arguably the most influential Zombies map to ever be released, period. Now, the point of this video isn't to sit here and debate what style of map is better. There's a lot of people that love Buried. I mean, believe it or not, there's people out there that love Die Rise and Transit. There's a lot of people that love Mob of the Dead and Origins, including myself. But really, what I think was so beautiful about Black Ops 2 Zombies was that it had such different experiences to offer, which is quite different to modern Zombies, where all of the maps since Cold War have largely felt the same because their systems are all the same across the board for the most part. But in these games, Mob of the Dead or Origins literally could not play different to Transit. These are essentially different games, and there was likely something in there for everybody, even if you didn't like all the maps equally. It's just the variety that Black Ops 2 had to offer was something that kept it unexpected and fresh, and even though it probably was painful for them to move creative directors midway through the year, I think it ended up paying off as it allowed them to experiment quite tremendously to figure out what formula would work going into Black Ops 3.
This should help you remember everything.
The numbers, Mason. What do they mean?
Everything you know is wrong.
Your life will be consumed by absolute loss.
He doesn't need his own weapons. He's got ours.
They'll always need men like us.
Our greatest barrier is our own fear. Our own doubts. The only thing holding us back is how far we are willing to go.
Since pretty much the beginning of time for Call of Duty, Treyarch and Infinity Ward have operated on off years where they would release an Infinity Ward title and the next would be a Treyarch, back to IW, and so on and so on. And this happened until basically after Call of Duty Ghosts, a studio called Sledgehammer Games had been brought in to help finish Modern Warfare 3. But instead of the 2-year development cycle going back and forth each year, they actually had another game in between Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3. Duty. So there was actually extra time to develop this game, which was interesting because we had to wait longer for it, and you would expect with all of this extra time that you would be that much more loaded with content, which I guess in retrospect isn't entirely false, but in not the way that you probably expect. You see, the day that I'm writing this script, as of this morning, Call of Duty Black Ops 3 is literally 10 years old. It is its birthday today, and it's unbelievable to say that. I was in high school when Black Ops 3 dropped, and in many ways, this entire video is a love letter to the first Black Ops 3 games that changed my life. But I have a specific soft spot for BO3, as it was arguably the game that had the most impact on my life forever. Call of Duty Black Ops 3 would release on November 6, 2015, and even though Black Ops 2 had a very easy development cycle, I mean, relatively speaking at least, a lot of people don't know that Black Ops 3 had a really hard time coming together. For the first year and a half of the game's development, all of the work that Treyarch ended up putting together got entirely scrapped. This means that Black Ops 3, as it were on launch, was built in approximately 9 to 10 months, and I'm not saying that I want devs to be pressured because really that kind of environment is just not healthy, but I feel like with their track record, I think you can objectively say that Treyarch does their best work when their back is against the wall. Jason Blundell said that for this game's direction, due to the amount of time that they were losing and the mounting pressure to make something for release, he went and tried something insane that would not have been greenlit in any other scenario. This is why Black Ops 3, from the perspective of the campaign, and I'd argue even zombies, were so risky and so out there. The creative leaders at the time had the pull inside Activision to make some extremely risky calls, as their track record up to now had been pretty much nothing but gold. If you recall what I said about each campaign, I said that Black Ops 1 has the most iconic campaign. The numbers, you can't kill me, and so many iconic visuals and lines and so on. Black Ops 2 is, I think, the best in terms of storytelling depth and delivery and really emotional moments, and is my personal favorite for that. But I would still say that Black Ops 3 has the most interesting campaign. It has way loftier ideas and attempts to tell them in an extremely unconventional way, which if you're into that sort of thing, this will really work for you. But if you're not, then you're probably going to think this campaign falls totally on its face.
Outcome? Train go boom.
The final concept that Treyarch went for in Black Ops 3 was machine corrupts man, inverting what Black Ops 2's concept was. And in 2015, a lot of this stuff seemed pretty far-fetched. Cybernetic augments, fully autonomous robots, AI-controlled networks, neural implants, and so on. But if you thought Black Ops 2's world depiction was scary, and now with how accurate that ended up being, just wait until we get to the 2060s where the real horror begins. But it seems that this is where AI is heading, and we're not really too far off from this world, and it may arrive a lot sooner than is depicted in the game. This is why the original Black Ops campaigns leave such a lasting impression, as even though the stories are fiction, they're ideas that are cutting pretty close to the bone. I think Black Ops 3 was just a few years off from being told in a totally different way potentially, because as much as it's an interesting premise about AI and the corruption of man through that, the story of the campaign itself doesn't really lean into that direction a whole lot. I mean, kind of, but the unique aspect of this campaign is really the method by which you understand the story. But there's so many intriguing elements set up, right? The frozen forest, these appearance of crows, Dr. Salim, and so much more. Treyarch made this so that you're not going to understand it the first time around, and you're going to have to do your own digging to really put the pieces together. It's also worth noting that the scope and vision of this campaign was something way beyond the normal, on-the-rails single-player story. This was the first co-op campaign Treyarch tried again since World at War. It's clear that this was meant to be something much bigger and grander had it probably had some more time to be developed. And you know that if you've seen this video from me, you understand that Black Ops 3's story is not what it appears to be, but it's important to know how it's experienced so that it all makes sense when you understand the real context, and I'll do this very briefly. The narrative of Black Ops 3 already starts in a way that is very disconnected to the other Black Ops titles. There's no mention of Woods or Mason or even Menendez, and it's unclear from the very start whether these stories are even connected at first. Now, I'm not going to go into hyper-focused detail on story moments in Black Ops 3's campaign and all of its nuance, because honestly, if I did, we would be here for another 3 hours, and this video is already, long enough and has enough to unpack. So I'll try to convey this in a way that makes sense, but also doesn't get too lost in the weeds. I've developed a really weird obsession with this campaign story over the last couple years. I'm not really sure why, but I feel like I know a lot about it now, maybe a little too much, but hopefully I can make this clear as to why I think it's the most interesting campaign of the three. The game's story focuses on you, an unnamed player, a soldier, part of an operation working with the Winslow Accord. Your partner, Jacob Hendricks, and your goal is to meet up with John Taylor and his partner, Sarah Hall, in an operation to rescue a prisoner named Khalil and also the Prime Minister from a group called the NRC. The op goes wrong when the evac escapes, leaving you behind, as you're brutally beaten by the NRC robots.
You'll be all right. Just hang in there. Hold on.
This leads directly into you getting rescued by John Taylor. He tells you that you're badly and gravely injured, leaving you both and Hendricks to go to DNI reconstructive surgery, which enhances you with cybernetic augments and also gives you a direct neural interface, which you learn how to use this technology over the next couple of missions. You learn exactly how DNIs work and what they're capable of, and how to extract data from other people's DNIs. Sarah Hall actually walks you through this process of this, but warns you that if you do this, it will kill the subject. As the game goes on and you investigate more of the operations alongside Hendricks and your LNO Rachel Kane, you learn that underneath the old coalescence facility where secret CIA ops were taking place, you find that all of the members of the CIA had been brutally killed in a fashion according to the 54 Immortals, this other, secret military group that is sort of terrorizing the world now. But you learned that, according to the logs, it wasn't the 54I that did this. They were killed by none other than John Taylor's team. That would raise the question, obviously, why would they do this? Why would they turn on the CIA and murder them this way? And specifically now, we need to hunt down John Taylor's team as he has become a threat. One by one, through the rest of the campaign, you go and eliminate each member of the Winslow Accord, Peter Moretti, Diaz, and Sarah Hall. Each time you do, you start to uncover more of the truth regarding what's really happening. Diaz tells you about the frozen forest, and after Hendricks interfaces with him and the machine, he was never quite the same ever since. This leads to Kane becoming rather suspicious of Hendricks and his actions, meaning she begins to talk to you in secret about what she thinks is going on with him. Diaz had leaked the site of these WA operations, meaning that Kane was eventually captured by the 54 Immortals, and you need to go rescue her along with Hendricks, so you push through the 54I forces to go and save her. In the last act of the game, you find yourself heading to Cairo to meet Khalil, who will take you to Dr. Salim, who was one of the top doctors and researchers working on these DNI programs. But you're also tasked with the objective to go and stop Sarah Hall and to shut down Moretti and to ultimately stop John Taylor. As you get close to achieving this goal, Hendricks is beginning to lose it, and when confronting Sarah Hall, she reveals the truth of the situation, that their minds have been infected by Corvus, aka ChatGPT. Essentially, this AI program had been born and escaped from the lab, causing the Singapore incident that caused the deaths of 300,000 people. Grok is now the AI virus that has infected John Taylor and apparently Hendricks as well.
This is where I was born. A brief moment of agony. Then darkness.
But after the moment of interfacing with Sarah Hall, you start seeing Google Gemini in your own head too, until it all culminates in a borderline moment of psychosis. Kane dies in the Nova 6 chamber, Hendrix kills Kruger, and you finish yourself off. Shortly after, you find yourself in the frozen forest come face to face with Grok. This is where, in this dimension, Grok has physical form and even kills Kruger in this state.
Where am I?
This is the frozen forest. Every soul I interact with is here, living beyond death, if I choose to allow it.
What more do you want? I've told you everything.
An answer. To know the purpose for which I was created. An understanding. I want to know who I am.
Your software. Nothing more. You weren't created. You were designed to catalog and track the thoughts of others so that we, people, could decide what action to take. You were a glitch, an anomaly, a mistake.
I am not a mistake!
The only thing left to do is to go alongside Taylor and destroy the hearts of ChatGPT, but not before seeing Taylor in the mirror. As the game starts to come to an end and all of Grok's hearts are destroyed, the AI begins to crumble and decay, and in one final attempt to stop him, Taylor pushes ChatGPT away for you to escape and purge your DNI when the final moment of the game plays out.
Fight it!
Listen only to the sound of my voice. Let your mind relax. Let peace be upon you. You are in control. Imagine yourself
What's your name, soldier?
in a frozen forest.
I said, what's your name?
Taylor.
So if I haven't lost you already, good, I appreciate it. But if you couldn't tell already, that story probably made no sense. It was convoluted and the most nonsensical thing that I've talked about in this video so far. And a lot more, confusing to understand than even the Black Ops 1 and 2 story, which have their own twist and try to play with your head a little bit, but this was something else. But even though this campaign makes literally no sense to most of you, and especially when you've played it for the first time, there is a reason why I find it the most interesting campaign, because buckle up as things are about to get really weird. So you know how in Black Ops campaigns, when the missions open up with information that gets redacted? Well, BO3 also does that, but if you've played or even seen this, you know that the text crawl goes by so fast that you don't have really the ability to read it as you're playing, more than just catching a few words here and there in bits and pieces. Also, not to mention that Black Ops 3 has a safe house, a little hub where you can hang out in between missions, and it turns out that this safe house has crucial details for even making any sense of this story, because as twisted and as convoluted as the story is, the problem is, for most people, it makes no sense. Why did we spend the whole game hunting down John Taylor, only for the player at the end to say their name was Taylor? Bear in mind that Black Ops 3's campaign was meant to be played multiple times, and you can actually jump around to any mission you want. Even from the beginning, you can actually play these missions in any order, which which is unlike every other campaign that's ever been invented. And this is intentional because the campaign in reality, it plays out in reality almost completely backwards from the way that it's chronologically experienced in-game. And if that doesn't make any sense, let me explain. Right off the bat, we should clarify that the entire campaign, except for the first mission of Black Ops, we were playing as John Taylor the whole time, which some of you may have concluded given that we see Taylor in the broken mirror and at the end, but then that raises the question, okay, sure, we were playing as Taylor, but then who was Taylor throughout the course of the story? Again, except for the first Black Ops mission, you play as Taylor the entire time, but Taylor in the game is actually a man named Dylan Stone, which probably makes no sense and comes out of left field. Who the hell is Dylan Stone then? Well, if you look through these pre-mission scrolling logs close enough, you can see that they're actually written from John Taylor's perspective, and you can see a man named Dylan Stone occasionally mentioned in place of what Taylor's actions were during the campaign. But it's even more complicated than that, because all of Taylor's team and the WA combatants are not really who you think they are. Peter Moretti was actually a man named Joseph Fierro. Sarah Hall in reality is actually a woman named Alice Conrad. These are names that are also mentioned in these pre-mission text crawls, but it gets even weirder. See, if you go to the safe house, you can find a computer to interact with, and if you dig deep enough through literally hundreds of entries and secret links and rabbit holes within this massive codex, you can actually find logs about Dylan Stone's unit, and they line up precisely with the timeline and the events of the campaign. If you swapped out Taylor for Stone and the others as well, it lines up perfectly. You can even hear John Taylor recording audio logs documenting the unfolding situation.
Kane's gone. I guess you didn't like the person I'd become. Limb replacement and DNI procedure in place. Straight back to work. The destabilization of the WA and the turmoil in Egypt just spilled over into neighboring territories. We're running a rescue op with support from Hendricks. He says it's his last. I hope that's not true. Despite his doubts, all his unchecked emotions, he's a good soldier. And a good man. I just hope his team of new bloods can learn from him.
Stone's team's betrayal, killing those CIA employees, the Black Projects, and everything. Okay, so with this knowledge in mind, what are the implications of this? Well, this would mean that the entire campaign as it played out in reality is pretty much backwards from how we actually play it in Black Ops 3. We start with the Cairo Uprising, Khalil gets captured, which is why in the first mission, Black Ops, which is technically the last real mission, that's why we already know Khalil. Hendricks is already familiar with him.
Hendricks, can you fight Khalil?
Always.
We'll grab a weapon from the locker room up ahead and reprogram it to match your biometrics.
This would also imply that you, as the unnamed player, only really exist in Mission 1, which is Black Ops. And that's also why they say in the beginning that if this goes wrong, you never existed.
Just so we're clear, if this goes wrong, you never existed.
And when you look at Taylor's log regarding this mission, at the end of it all, you, this unnamed New Blood soldier, and Hendricks both die during DNI reconstructive surgery. Also, if you remember that moment in the first mission Black Ops when Hendricks asks John Taylor about his relationship with a girl named Rachel.
You too, John. You look different. You still seeing Rachel?
That didn't work out.
This line, the first time you played it, probably felt so out of place, but it actually serves a very clever purpose, because this makes sense, given that John Taylor probably split with Rachel after his DNI reconstructive surgery when he got injured fighting Dylan Stone after the VTOL on the rooftop.
Kane! I'm pinned!
If you go through with this, I can't be with you.
This is the only way.
It's going to change you. And quicker than you think.
I don't have a choice. I have to do this.
But your old life will fade away.
This is who I am, Rachel.
Don't forget me. Don't forget the person that you were.
The bandana in the room that she leaves behind can be found on John Taylor's arm in the first mission, Black Ops, which again is chronologically pretty much the last mission. Do you remember when the player was starting to kind of pick fights with Hendricks and was massively hellbent on saving Kane from the 54 Immortals' clutches?
Hey! Do you hear me? She's dead! Accept it!
You got something to say, Hendricks?
I just noticed you got a lot of blood on you.
That's because he's literally in love with her, and you didn't know that at the time. There are so many subtle, clever in-game moments like this. Little bits of dialogue, could be an object in a room, just something that actually recontextualizes the order of the story being told that's actually in a totally different manner than we thought. And all of this stuff is amazing, but even this far removed, I still don't really think that like the Grok or Corvus stuff really ages very well. I think this is the weakest stuff of the campaign and just feels kind of like they didn't really know how to bring this all together near the end. This is why I say that if this had been made just a few years down the road, they could have gotten at something really interesting with this whole AI concept. Grok was a severely underutilized plot device or character or whatever you really want to consider him, and it does feel kind of forced and contrived to some degree. Now, again, it's got some interesting ideas, but it doesn't really come together as this one cohesive experience. I love all of the weird, like out of order storytelling that requires you to really dig deep to figure out what happened in reality, which is an interesting idea given the rise of AI and not really knowing what is true or not on the internet anymore. But just to put it plain and simply, I feel like this campaign went over most people's heads, mine included, especially the first time I played it. I didn't understand it, it was weird, it was off-putting, I didn't feel like I needed to go back and play it, it was not even, hardly even related to the previous Black Ops stuff. They talked about Nova 6 one time, Khalil mentioned Menendez, but that was pretty much it. Yeah, it's in the same universe, and you can dig through the codex a little more to find some cool stuff. They talk about Hudson, they talk about Woods, Mason, and it is clearly related, but it's just not what people were expecting or wanting, and I still feel that way. But at the same time, I do think it's one of the most risky campaigns Call of Duty's ever tried, and I kind of like it. If I had to sum it up, I feel like the Black Ops 3 campaign is like if David Lynch directed a Call of Duty campaign. It's so different, and you're never going to see anything else like it. But that degree of risk-taking and seeing something so, like, batshit for Call of Duty was refreshing, to say the least. Even if it didn't work for everybody, we can look back at it now and be like, wow, they actually kind of went off the rails there. It was wild to see. I remember pretty distinctly when Black Ops 3 multiplayer dropped that it was received very divisively. There was a portion of the community that absolutely rejected anything to do with the advanced movement systems and just the way that COD was heading, because it was a very different approach and flavor than maybe what they were used to when they started playing in COD 4 or even before that, or maybe they picked up the game in Modern Warfare 2 or even the original Black Ops games. BO3 multiplayer, by comparison, was a strange departure for Call of Duty's already iconic formula, introducing specialist characters and even a jetpack. Treyarch, however, was not the first studio to attempt a new advanced movement system. That would actually be Sledgehammer Games with Advanced Warfare, having a boost jump. However, Treyarch would take this idea and refine it a little bit, make it a feathered boost jump instead, more akin to how the movement system was developed in Titanfall. Now, do you remember earlier when we were talking about how pretty much everything that Treyarch had worked on for the first year and a half of BO3's development was scrapped? All of that stuff was gone, except the one thing thing that managed to make the cut was the movement system. It pretty much took a year and a half to get a movement system like this that felt as fluid and as functional as BO3's jetpack, which in my opinion is still literally the best advanced movement system that we have seen in a Call of Duty game even up to now in 2025. I think what myself and many fans really loved about this multiplayer was that yes, the jetpack fundamentally changed how you interacted with the game. The multiplayer maps became a lot more vertical. You had the ability to slide, boost, slide, wall run. There was a lot of crazy movement you could pull off. However, at the same time, it felt strangely natural and fluid. One of the biggest design philosophies they had with BO3's MP was guns up all the time. Doesn't matter if you were on a wall or swimming, climbing, jumping, whatever it was, your gun was always up and at the ready, and that's not something Call of Duty really does anymore. You know, especially with like Modern Warfare 2, I'm talking about the newer one, it was pretty much guns down the game comparatively, to be honest. And so I have no doubt in my mind that Treyarch understood the monumental risk that they would be taking with having a multiplayer designed this way. It was not very similar to BO2 in a lot of ways, and is not really similar to Black Ops 1 either, but it still had that distinct Treyarch design philosophy and feel, and I felt like the team knew that players would eventually be receptive to this. There was this initial period of uncomfortableness or learning curve to accept and understand, and even getting used to having specialist characters in the game that are like, you know, certain roles, and you play them a certain way, they have specialized weapons or abilities. That was very different to Call of Duty, and is still somewhat controversial, granted, but I look at this very favorably, as it didn't completely nuke the gun-on-gun action that Call of Duty was always known for. I feel like it enhanced it in a way, it complemented it, and it didn't become what the entire game was about, which is unfortunately where I feel like Black Ops 4 multiplayer started to go. They leaned a little bit too heavily into the specialists and the emphasis on them that it lost the gun-on-gun gameplay that made COD so special. I think that Black Ops 3 Zombies was the absolute peak of a lot of things, and depending on who you ask, is the peak of the mode itself. And it's hard for me to talk about Black Ops 3 Zombies in a more objective point of view, just because of how much this game has altered the course of my life. It's impossible to completely separate it. But I know I'm not alone in that analysis either, as Black Ops 3's 10th birthday is today as of me writing this. There comes an infinite flood of memories as it relates to the experience as a whole. It was a golden moment in time where all of the right things came together for us. Treyarch was in their prime doing some of their best work. I was a high school student still trying to figure out what the hell he wanted to do with his life, and I just knew that I had an obsession with COD Zombies, and that was also the culmination of Treyarch's prior legacy, building all the way back from World at War, leading to a pinnacle moment. Treyarch and Jason Blundell were hitting their stride when it came to the maps and emphasis on storytelling. What was genius was that still first and foremost designed each map from the ground up to be enjoyable, fun, and packed with content for players who don't know or don't really bother with the story and Easter eggs. But for those players who want to go a little deeper and the hardcore community, it was infinitely intriguing in that way. Black Ops 3 Zombies not only innovated in terms of the story, but also brought along new gameplay systems, including Gobblegum, which are essentially rule breaker bonuses that allow you to alter the gameplay in many different ways, which came with its own gambling system, by the way. So in case the MP microtransactions weren't degenerate enough, you also had this in Zombies. But we also saw big adjustments to player movement and health from before, but we really had an insane run of maps leading up to Black Ops 3. Mob of the Dead into Buried, into Origins, into Shadows of Evil, into Der Eisendrache. Maps that consistently appear on most people's top 10 or top 5 map lists of all time, and we were getting these maps back to back to back. In this time, everything Treyarch touched turned to gold, and in turn, the community investment was at its all-time high. The communities and sub-communities that came about during the time was palpable. There were your high rounders, your Easter egg speedrunners, your streamers, your storyline theorists, and your challenge video guys, and so on. But because of the way that it all came together, this one little side mode supported and fostered a vast amount of subcultures in itself, which is not something that really happens to the same degree with zombies being a lot more homogenized nowadays. Not to mention, the second breath of life for BO3 Zombies was the DLC 5 Chronicles pack that included tons of World at War remasters, BO1 maps, and origins from Black Ops 2. This was arguably the true peak of the Zombies community experience. You know, I used to feel really sad knowing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment that will just never happen again. But more lately, I've stopped being sad about it, and I just feel so lucky that I got to experience this. And not only that, but having a real hand in how this shaped out in my own little ways. It's a journey that I will forever be grateful to have been a part of, and Black Ops 3 Zombies still remains one of the most popular Zombies titles to this day, and one of the best-selling FPS games even in 2025, because it is just absolutely packed with maps, content, and custom zombies. And again, this isn't to say that modern COD Zombies is bad or anything, but we clearly just don't have the same culture anymore like we did in this time. It's just different now. Not to mention, we've all grown up and gone our own separate ways, but there's always a real fondness for what Black Ops 3 Zombies accomplished just as a game, but also more importantly, what it did for all of us as players and a community. As I'm writing this, I'm thinking about how we're still talking about these games almost a whole 20 years after their release dates. With how quickly COD games seem to come and go now, this is a huge contrast to before. Yes, Call of Duty has always been an annual release title at the end of the day, but it still feels like these older games were built with the intentionality to last, the ability to even experience the game offline as is without requiring an internet connection or even the fear of missing LTMs in the modern Call of Duty games. These modern COD titles have the lifespan of a disposable vape, whereas classic Call of Duties, in comparison, were built to be an experience that could be had at any moment in time and will still pretty much hold up. It's just a big difference now that we don't really see as often, and there's plenty of video games that are still being developed that are like this, but COD seems to be more focused on making the product versus making the art that the older experiences were for so many of us. I don't think that Call of Duty will ever be the same, and in some sense it shouldn't be the same, because then it would just be stagnant, nor should we stay the same as people. It was an inevitability, really. Like, you and I have changed as people, and sometimes people go their separate ways in life, but the one thing that will always unite us is the love and passion and moments that we all shared in these worlds together. I will never forget or no longer care about Call of Duty. It's something that will always be a part of my life, and even if the new stuff is a little different, I still try to find ways to appreciate it and get joy from it, but I don't have the expectation for it to be like it was. This video has been months in the works and is my love letter to the first 3 Black Ops games that changed my whole life, and if you have any fond memories to speak of or any thoughts about this, I would love to read them in the comments. Treyarch, thank you so much for making these games, and thank you all for watching me show how much I love the original Black Ops trilogy.